Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 674. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, drnorge. I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim, the sensei of the whatnot, the master of speculation, the duke of the sultan of strategery, the bridge-defying, wants to be perfectly clear that he is not more of the same but is an evolution because he remains the elder statesman of the podcast Segulin.
How's it going, eh?
Jim, on this episode, we are going to be talking about Wildcats #1, Stargirl Lost Children #1, and we're going to be talking about Punchline Gotham Game issue #2. We are sponsored as always by DCB Service and InStockTrades.com. Mr. Segulin, what is going on over at DCBService.com?
You know what I love to say? 50% off, and we have Wonder Woman. Who is Wonder Woman? The deluxe hardcover edition. 50% off, only $14.99, but we also have 50% off Absolute Dark Knight's Death Metal! Hardcover, 50% off, $50. Thank you, DCBS.
Wow. I don't know what to do with that one. Over at InStockTrades.com. I want to shout out this section of the site. I've talked about it on some previous episodes before, but I really dig it. It's the Coming Soon section where you can create your own wish lists. And this is great if there's books coming up that you don't want to miss. Also, it's helpful for budgeting things out, knowing what's coming up down the road. Like in the Coming Soon section, they've got the Aquaman trade paperback that's there. The Rogues hardcover's coming out. Shazam Thundercrack trade paperback. The Superman Son of Kal-El hardcover volume 2, easy for me to say. And The Amazing World of Krypton is a trade paperback coming out. These are all things that are coming out like now, that are on the list. It's nice to be able to wish list these things so you can kind of prepare your budget and know what books. I miss a lot of times trade paperbacks and hardcovers and things that I want for series where I want the physical version of them. And I'm doing a lot more in collecting physical trade paperbacks and hardcovers as I'm reading more digital. The physical piece I like to collect in a collected volume now. Because I still like my physical. I've got to have them. It's part of my collecting mentality. So I want to thank DCB Service at InStockTrades.com for continuing to support our show. Mr. Segulin, what kind of a podcast are we?
Raging Bullets is a spoiler podcast. We go in-depth into plotline, story twists, and whatnot of the comics we're discussing on today's show. So if you haven't read the books, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy the show.
Let's talk some comics.
A scarlet costume ejects from his ring, and in a blur of motion, police scientist Barry Allen becomes the Flash.
Our first discussion this episode is going to be of Wildcats #1. Matthew Rosenberg is the writer. Steven Segovia on art. Elmer Santos is on colors. Ferran Delgado on letters. Variant covers by Jim Lee, Scott Williams, Alex Sinclair, Stanley Archer-Lau, Ben Oliver. Wildcats created by Jim Lee and Brandon Choi. Ben Abernathy's the editor. Cover by Segovia and Santos. 125 variant cover by Jeff Spokes. 150 variant cover by Alan Gua. 1/100 variant cover by Dan Hipp. 1/150th variant cover by Jim Lee and Scott Williams, and the 90s variant cover by Brett Booth, Sandra Hope, and Andrew Dalhouse. And apologies for any name butchery at all. Wildcats is an interesting book in the sense that I have picked up Wildcats in various forms since its very beginning, but it's always been a book that, unfortunately, I've been hit with like budget cuts, as far as I followed it for a few issues, always loved it, always loved the characters, loved what was being done. I followed them, usually for like anywhere from 5 to 10 issues, usually the initial arc, never jumped off it due to dissatisfaction. Sometimes I jumped on in the middle of runs where like a new creative team was coming on and I wanted to see what they were going to do with the characters. Alan Moore did a run on Wildcats. We had James Robinson, who's done runs on Wildcats. There's been like an immense amount of talent that, and I'm underselling, this book has enjoyed, or this concept has enjoyed a lot of people touching on this. I was excited to see that we were getting a new Wildcats limited series and just to see what they would do with it now. Really, really excited to explore this Wildstorm universe. You and I did probably the most reading of it during Worldstorm. Because, kind of during the life of this podcast, there was an opportunity for us to kind of dance around the Worldstorm event and those books as they were coming out. And back in the day when that was a thing, we both really liked what was going on with Worldstorm. What has your history been with Wildcats? I mean, other than Worldstorm, because that was mine's been throughout the history of Wildcats. I have jumped into because I like the concept so much. I've jumped in. It's just always been one that unfortunately has taken a hit due to economics. And that's really been the only reason. It's got never been due to quality. It's just been, I haven't been able to afford to continue following it. What about you? Where are you at?
Worldstorm. That's, the podcast is my only history with the Wildcats, really. If I read it back, in the college days, I maybe read like an issue and that'd be about it. The podcast is my dealings with the Wildcats. And again, I thought back every time we read it, I thought the characters were neat. So when, they announced it's coming back, I'm like, heck yeah, I'm all in on that. Because I remember reading it, liking Grifter and having some fun with it. And again, I like a nice team dynamic that's a little off kilter. So a team that's off kilter, I think, is a good description of Wildcats. So I was all for this. And it was funny because I did have to get reminded of who different people were. And this issue did a great job kind of filling us in on who exactly are these different people, what they're about, what their groove is. So, I've got, you can arguably say, no experience with Wildcats. And jumping into this, and I think that's something that this story did a brilliant job with, that it has longtime Wildcats readers loving it, and it has people like me who really, I could very easily say I was not a Wildcats reader. That this is my introduction to them because it's been so limited and so few and far between that I've read stuff.
I like this take. This is clearly, at least felt to me like the recent take on Grifter that we've been reading. Cole Cash. This version of Cole Cash is this one that we're, I think, most currently familiar with, and I like that it's continuing off on that because I felt like he was my latch-on character at the start of this, just because I have the most exposure with him, and really liked that we were seeing this issue through his lens. He was the narrator. And taking us through who everybody was and the events going on there. Zealot is a character who I've always been fascinated by. Like, whether she's been a guest character or seeing her on Wildcats, she was always my favorite character in the sense that I was most drawn to kind of like this idea of this space ninja, kind of a samurai thing that she had going on. There was something I always liked about, I was drawn to just how cool the character looked. As you've gotten to know more about the character, there's a lot to her backstory that makes her a very unique and interesting character. So I was glad to see her being on this team because this is a team that's had multiple variations with multiple characters on it. So I wasn't sure like who was going to actually make the cut and who wasn't. Zealot's kind of you have to have Zealot.
Yeah.
To me. So it was good that she was in the beginning, very early, introduced by Grifter, giving us a little bit of her backstory as far as how she fits into this particular take on the Wildcats. And that was something that was pretty important. Deathblow was a character I remember, too, having his own book back in the old Wildstorm days. And I got to read, a couple things with him. I remember the Michael Cray book that was so recently done. There's, Deathblow and Michael Cray, and just this whole thing it's a concept. I will not pretend they are my, I'm very well versed on them, but I really have liked this character going forward. This is what I kind of like about this mini. I feel like this is a chance for me once again to try and delve into these characters who I've always liked. And a chance to do something more with. So I'm glad to see DC not shelving these characters because there's people listening to this that are diehard fans. of these characters. And I think there's a chance to bridge that gap and hopefully do something more with them. I hope this one's successful because I really dug this out of the first issue.
Yeah. And I loved how it's opening with just, again, the story of the Damonites and the Carabin. And I'm sitting there reading this one, oh, wow, really? That's kind of interesting. And again, it's a grifter con. And I love the fact that they pulled me into it. I was right along with it. I'm like, oh, that's kind of neat. And then the guy, calls his bluff and he gets cut in half. And I'm like, for me, this right here was the opening 2 pages were absolutely outstanding at setting the tone of the book. Mm-hmm. Because, again, I 100% was all in on the grifter con. And again, it's grifter, so you're supposed to be able to, he's supposed to, pull you into that story. And I'm like, and it's funny because in the back of my mind, I'm like, is that real story? I think it is. I don't remember. I remember reading stuff with those 2 names in it. I'm like, is that actually the whole story? Is that actually one of the things that they do? It's funny. It had me going, I got to read. I got to find out if that story is true or not.
And Zealot's like, he wasn't buying it. That was so great. It was such a great moment because it's kind of like, we're cutting to the chase.
Yeah. Well, he had his finger on the kill switch. He was about to blow up the building, so they needed to stop it. So Grifter was doing his con, and again, love that about the character. Every time I read this guy, he has that groove to him, and I really like that about him. I thought that's something, because he is, very deadly, very dangerous, but again, he's the grifter for a reason. That's a con man. That's hey, let's talk about this. Come on, we don't need to kill each other. And the whole time his team's getting ready to cut you in half. It was absolutely brilliant.
I love the fact that, he's trying to get information from this scientist, and it's not going where, he wanted it to go. So he just shoots the guy, and they're transported out, and he's like, tell me you didn't kill that guy, Cole. He was torturing monkeys. And they vanish just before Team Bat show up. Yep. Which I love that there's this idea of, this is a team that's been operating under the covert, and this is how they've been getting away with what they've been doing. They're operating under the radar and not leaving enough evidence or clues to their identities, their whereabouts. This is why we don't know they're a covert action team, and they're able to operate under the radar like this. I really liked that presentation. I liked the use of Batgirl and Nightwing in that moment, seeing them pop in. I'm like, okay, these are 2 that would catch on if there was any evidence left behind, and there wasn't. That was cool. It was really cool.
Yeah, and I like the fact that the that he kills, that was their target. They were supposed to go and get him and bring him back to Wildcats, and he was going to become part of their team. But because he's torturing monkeys, chimpanzees, he's like, no, bam, and he shoots them.
I like they get back and, they're being scolded for the way that this mission was handled. And they're like, listen, I'm adding another probationary member to this team because you're a little over your heads with this. Caitlin Fairchild, which was good. It's like, okay, we're bringing in a character from Gen 13 who I really liked. We're bringing her in with the idea that she's more of a newbie to these season ones. And they're like, is this a joke bringing her on board the team? And this idea of adding more characters on here. We're adding into Maxine, who's a character who I really loved from classic Wildcats. I remember this character. It's pulling from different characters in different eras of Wildcats and also different characters from the whole Wildstorm universe and bringing them in. This was a smart move with all of this because they're characters who I'm loosely familiar with, who I've always liked being brought in. I loved Gen 13. You and I were both big fans of the Worldstorm relaunch of Gen 13 and really enjoyed that series. So bringing Fairchild in was another piece, too, where you're tapping into multiple different fan groups to bring them into this series. It's a smart lineup that they're putting in this one.
Yeah, and again, when they said Fairchild, it's like, hey, I know her. Outstanding, And again, I like the fact that the team, the Zealot and Deathblow are like, this is they didn't want her in there because of the rookie status. They knew what Grifter was going to say, and they're like, tough. This is the team, And I like when you kind of get that, because you can see down the ways there's going to be some issues. There's going to be some issues happening with this team. And that's always a nice teaser for what's coming.
Now, this story that he's telling about being at what was going on with the DC Zombie story, he wasn't actually there. He's doing another grift here, right?
I think so. But again, I don't know. And I think that's the neat thing about Grifter is how much of this is real. Because this is the infected, and this is that whole story with the infected with the anti-life equation. They're not zombies, actually they're infected. Batman, Superman, they're all the dudes. I'm like, again, it could be another grift, or he could have actually been there. Who knows with this Wildcats team if they've been on multiple Earths.
Yeah. So how much of the first story was true?
Exactly.
That
was the thing I loved about it.
Because it makes you question afterwards, like, was he there? Was he not? He sure knows a lot about it. But that's a sign of a good grift, because he's grifting us as much as he's grifting this dude.
Yes. And that's the thing I loved about this issue.
Me too.
Was the fact that we are getting pulled into the con. And it had me to the point where after reading it, I'm like, I got one. I wanted to ask you if the first story was true, and then I'm like, I was planning on doing some research, see if I could find if that was the original Wildcats story that I've never read before.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they're pulling. Wait, this is brilliant writing, because he's pulling from actual his stories, and for his grifts. So it makes you sit there and go, well, was he there? Was he not? So I read it one way the first time. I was like, well, he was actually there. And then the second time, I'm like, I don't know. I think he's pulling one on me. I think, like, if Zealot were there, somebody getting chopped in half. I don't know where this is particularly going on that. I love that, because he even, like, as the guys are confronting him, we got Constantine Drakon and Brick. You're the guy who killed Toyman and Norma Freeze. I don't know any Toyman. And if you're looking for who killed the Freeze lady, might ask her creepy murderous husband. As they're sitting there, they're smashing his head into the table and stuff like that. He's letting this stuff happen because it will pay off for him in the future, potentially. I love the fact that it's not just this grift. It's setting himself up for being underestimated in the future by other people because it may pay off to his advantage. I mean, who lets their nose almost get broken if that's what happened there, to set themselves up for the future? Nobody but Grifter, right?
Yeah. Actually, it's a brilliant strategy.
Sure it is.
100%. I'm like, dude, man, this right here is strategery, Sean. Right here, this is a good definition of it. Getting your face slammed into the bar, just so you can catch a possible edge on the bad guys. And to be honest, you look at it, he is right. People, if you're sitting there and you're, throwing throwing some heavy punches, you're gonna get sloppy, thinking, "I'm winning this fight. I'm winning." No, you're not. The old rope-a-dope. Ali did it. It's you set the person up for that in one moment, and Grifter does it pretty well with a bullet to the leg.
I love that afterwards it leads into a confrontation with Marlowe. Well, I mean, first of all, it leads to some, reflection of his brother, where he's like, looking at his brother and basically trying to live up to that image of himself. He deliberately gets put into jail to try and sleep it off, which I thought was an interesting sort of piece. But this idea of Marlowe and Jack Colt being classic from Wildcats, being brought in as a bodyguard. And I like that we're slowly introducing characters and concepts from the Wildcats universe, brand new for readers, before we get to our first event with Fairchild. And seeing Fairchild be brought up on the team. And this version of Fairchild is not, it's going back right to her beginning, right? I mean, this Gen 13 hasn't happened? Am I right on that?
I'm guessing.
Yeah. Which I kind of like this being a ground floor series where...
Though she does say she's been in the field once or twice. She does tell him that, so that could be the whole Gen 13 story arc.
That would be more than a once or twice, though, if it was the Gen 13 story arc.
Right.
But it could have been, maybe with Gen 13 or the introduction of that. I don't know. It's interesting seeing that battle go on, and I love that Deathblow is kind of cannon fodder because they can bring him back.
Well, another thing I loved about the sequence, the before sequence when he's first out of prison and even going back to the bar sequence when he's getting his head slammed into the ground, and all that fighting, all that's going on. He picked the one guy's pocket. He picked the target scientist's pocket, and he did it. And I loved because you can't really see when it's coming, but he does let you know. Because he's saying, how time to pull out the card. And he pulls out his credit card. And he does all that to distraction, so that guy goes back into his wallet to put his card away, and that's when he's able to lift the guy's ID off of him. And throughout all the commotion of the fight, all that stuff is all done not only to just, to get the information, to, just be Cole, but also it's to get that guy's ID badge. The new scientist ID badge. And again, it cracked me up because you're sitting there saying, hey, you're going to be able to get the guy. I don't want to repeat it. The Hive. Oh, yeah, no problem. You flip the page like, okay, yeah, it's gone bad. All the scientists are dead. Like, oh, man, guys.
The battle sequence was pretty fantastic because we get to see Fairchild for the first time, basically interact with the team where she's like, she's not here as a joke. She can actually punch a hole to the stairs. And he's like, wait, this is serious? I thought she was here. He thought he was getting punked. And I like the way that he's talking to her. She's sitting here, and I love that because she's like going back to him going, listen, I'm not a dog. Stop talking to me like I'm your puppy. Because he was talking to her like that. That was some great dialogue. So he had seen this before. And I like how he's like, I've seen her do this like a half a dozen times before, and it's never not disturbing. That would be kind of, seeing somebody turn giant size like that would be something where it'd be like shocking, right? Yeah. I loved that kind of interplay. Like, she's now this giant woman, but she can only do it as long as her adrenaline is allowing her to do it. Like, once it starts spiking, she's tapped out, and now you've got to carry her along. So she's there. She's a part of the team. She's an effective part of the team, but it's something you also have to prepare for when you're strategically rolling her out. You mentioned strategy before. I thought it was something that was really great about all this. How do you balance out the inner workings and the team dynamics when you've got this kind of thing that you're dealing with? I thought it made it a very unique read. The fact that we can have her power up, and it can get you out of a scrape or two, but you're going to be carrying her afterwards. That was really, really well done.
Well, yeah, and again, I loved how we get that moment, and she passes out, and they're getting out, they're home free. No Green Arrow shows up. I'm like, oh, man, guys. And oh, good, superheroes. Oh, yeah, it's a member of the Justice League.
Not one of the scary ones, Robin Hood. Yeah. I'm like, wait a minute, this is Green Arrow. Do not be dissing on my boy. I did not see where this story was going, it leading there, because this we get a reminder that this takes place in the DC universe, and sometimes the underbellies of the DC universe, because they're surrounded, and Fairchild's back up and punches them a hole in the floor, and they wind up right in the midst of this underground tunnel that is occupied by the Court of Owls, which I don't know about you, I am ready for a good Court of Owls storyline. If you're gonna have Wildcats with the Court of Owls, Grifter interacting with the Court of Owls. I can't wait to Zealot and the Talons. This is a story that I want to read. They did a lot in this first issue to get me intrigued by this book, and it's the one of many books that I'm sad as a miniseries, but I'm glad it's a miniseries at the same time. I'm hoping that this leads to I'm very into this. I'm hoping it wraps up the same way that it's starting off. Winds up being this really cool event, and we get more of these. I am very excited for issue 2 on this one. Very high on this book.
They did a great job of getting everybody up to speed, who's who, giving us a good idea of these different characters, what they can do, but also then setting up for the next episode. Yeah. The next issue. Again, what you said, Zealot versus the Talons. I 100% want to see that fight because that is going to be awesome.
Yeah.
And just Grifter dealing with the court, the way Grifter deals with, things. That for me is going to be worth its weight in gold. 100% looking forward to issue 2.
Want to talk some Stargirl?
Yes, please.
Oh, no, you don't!
next discussion is on Stargirl and the Lost Children, issue number 1. The writer is Jeff Johns, art by Todd Nauck, Nauck, colors by Matt Hearns, letters by Rob Lay, cover by Todd Nauck, variant cover Crystal Kung, Kung, K-U-N-G, 125 variant cover by Mayo Sen Naito, with editor Andrew Marino. Senior editor is Katie Kubert, with Stargirl was created by Jeff Johns and Lee Moder.
I was a huge fan of the book Young All-Stars, and I love that this book kicks off with 1942. We've got TNT and Dynamite, who are characters who I really loved. This is an interesting mix of introducing some classic characters while introducing new concepts, like things that none of us as readers would know because they're concepts that didn't exist before. But the reason being that we didn't know about them is because they were taken off the table. I like this Lost Sidekicks storyline, adding more to the mythos that's already a rich and compelling mythos of the JSA, the All-Stars, this whole group. I liked when they showed that 1942 sequence. It's almost that dot style of inking. They did a really good job of making it feel like a classic comic book there. And I thought that feel was like so perfect in that sequence. And seeing the interactions between TNT and Dynamite and the rings and how their powers reacted together, I just thought was just such a really cool sequence of events. The characters I've always been fascinated in. As a kid, when the JSA was introduced and this idea of the multiple Earths, I became fascinated with characters like this. And I love TNT and Dynamite. I love this kicked off with them. I did not know where this story was going to go, and I was geeking out over this sequence.
And again, here's another interesting thing. I no idea who TNT and Dynamite are, but like you, I love the fact that they went with the old school, what appears to be an old school style, telling it, gave us some pretty good information on this kid and on who he is and what's going on. So it immediately has me connecting to him and immediately has me rooting for him. So this story did a brilliant job with somebody who knows absolutely nothing about these people, getting me emotionally connected to them. Within a couple pages, I'm right along with him, especially after you see these cool sequences of them working together. Then you see present day, 6 months ago, where he's grown up, and you learn about how the first of the kids to lose their mentor was him, and you feel for him. Because we had that connection early, that one little story, that one little adventure, you could see the rush of the energy and excitement, the fun he was having with this. And again, it's the story being told, the artwork working with the story being told really drew me into him, when he was Dynamite, and I'm like, that for me was like, that is outstanding work, that in a couple pages, I'm already connected to this guy, and I want things to work out for him, and then you go into present day, and you're like, oh man, that poor guy. He's still dealing with the pain. He's still dealing with the tragedy. And again, how do you go from being that kid who is a sidekick to a superhero to being not that, and to being forgotten about and unknown and all that? 100% within a couple pages, I'm feeling for this guy and I'm rooting for him. And again, it's the story laid out because I've got no history on this, but I'm already invested into it within a couple pages.
They were a front page story back in the day. They stopped the fox and the crow again. This is their rogues gallery. I also love that in the vehicle, it was like this cool bit where TNT's driving and he's like, listen, now that we've, powered up and all that stuff, I got to go do business. You ready for the wheel? And there's a button push and it has a pop out steering wheel and gas pedal and everything like that right from the floor. So the passenger can take over driving the vehicle. I thought it was a really cool gimmick that felt like really cool tech for the 40s. Yes. And I love that their vehicle had that ability in there. You would see how that would be effective. And to your point, adding to this all the opening pages had that adventure feel to it. And it's one of the reasons why I find that time frame so endearing. And the way Jeff Johns is able to capture that and make it feel today and make it feel something like where you're like, I want that now. I want to read that now. I want these characters to bring those sensibilities to the table now. You got to establish that right in the beginning in a place where we're all on the same playing field of this is why it's cool. So, like, to your point, I had a history with TNT and Dynamite, going back. I loved Young All-Stars. I love these characters. So I have a history with these characters. These pages, you were having the same experience with them, but in a very different way. It was like, this is my gateway to them. These are who these characters are, and, like, you're just as intrigued by them from a different angle, just coming at them from a different... That's something that Johns does very, very well. And, boy, what a gorgeous pages in the beginning. And you're right. Then you go to this sad sequence from 6 months ago where... How did this guy get, like, here? Yeah. How do you go from that to here? And you want him to not be that.
Yeah, and again, it's one of those, it's one of those things I can kind of understand how he could get there.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that for me was, it wasn't like, it wasn't his fault. There's a lot of people who they have a fall from grace because it's their fault.
Sure.
They do something, they do something wrong, they do something illegal, whatever the reasoning, they had a direct impact on. This kid had nothing. He didn't do anything wrong. His TNT died. His hero died, saving the day. And what happens to him? And I love the fact that and you immediately feel bad for the guy, and not like, oh, pathetic guy, fall from grace kind of thing. No, you feel bad for him, and I love the fact that, as I said, within a couple pages, I was already feeling for him. And then you flip the page, and we go back today.
Well, hang on before you go to that though, because there's more to this piece. Because I think he's touching on also. He's like, we were back in the early days. None of us kids talked about this. Like, we never talked about legacy because that wasn't a thing yet. We never even thought about it because they were the sidekicks. They were the original sidekicks. So there was nothing to compare themselves to. No one had lost anyone yet. So they had there was no support group. There was nobody else to talk to. He's like, I was the first. And I was alone again for decades. And he's like, but I won't be for much longer because he's clearly on this quest of some sort, which we know what the quest is, but wow. And to your point, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but like, you're right. Then we go to today with Stargirl, kind of get her story brought into play, which is, it's appropriate to after you see where his piece is. But I thought it was so cool that he was talking about the fact that I didn't have anybody to turn to because there was nobody that could talk to him about that. They wouldn't, there was no baseline to build it off of. I thought that was really cool. Simpler times lead to that problem because of the fact that they didn't experience that loss.
Yeah, and again, it's you go from that one page then into your present day, and you're seeing again another really cool one-page spread brings you up to speed who Stargirl is.
Yeah.
Now we both know who Stargirl is, and we're comfortable with it, but if you're relatively new to the character, you got a really nice little summary in one page. Really good groove on who she is, what she's about, and again, even just the further who she is outside of the costume. She's not just Stargirl. There's other stuff going on with her. You see her connection with her friends, her dealing with school, her dealing with her mom, her stepfather. It was again. I loved how this book laid it out for us that because we got 100% connect to Stargirl. 100% have to be rooting for her because she's the main character in this. Now, granted, I don't think anybody who's buying this book doesn't already know who Stargirl is. I don't think we're going to get any completely blank blank canvases coming in, but if there's anybody who's relatively new to the thing, this for me was a really great moments because not only does it show her, it shows her mother, it shows the stepfather, Pat, and it does a really good job with bringing us to speed on that. And I thought again within a couple pages, I already have the main players down, and I already got a good comfort level with them. I'm already rooting for the people I should be rooting for. I think that for me was, again, just something on storytelling-wise, I absolutely loved this tale in that it got me emotionally invested right away, right from jump.
You said something interesting there. You're like, I don't know if we have anybody who doesn't know Stargirl. I wonder, though, if we'd maybe have people reading this who have never read Stargirl in comics.
Right.
And I think one of the nice things about this page, and I'm nodding as you were talking about how much you loved it and why you loved it, I think one of the things that I really dug about this is I like a primer that brings me up to speed on, okay, has anything changed? Like, where are we at? What is the status quo of this character? What is her backstory now? You know, are we following the same rules that we followed before? I'm okay if you're changing things up a bit, and because there's some changing going on with the sidekicks, right? We're adding new ones on. It was a really cool thing to see in this. The fact that this was bringing you up to speed, and it was done on a short little concise page that kind of brought you up in a couple of panels and then takes you into like where her status quo is right now. And I like the mom sitting there saying, when did you fight Solomon Grundy? You know, because her grades are slipping and stuff like that. And she's like, on Monday. I thought that was so great because it's the hard part about being a teenager where you've got to have the balance of you're trying to keep your grades up, you're trying to keep school up and things like that. You got a parent who understands that you're this superhero and you've got some responsibilities there, sure, and respects it. Like, because mom, I think, I dig her mom. Because her mom's being about as fair as you possibly can be in that situation, right? Because she could be basically telling her, you know what, forget you. You've kind of been irresponsible here and everything. You're you're completely done with superheroing now. You're going to focus back on school. This is too important for you. And she's like, you know the rules here. You got to be honest. You're not being honest, so I'm grounding you.
Yeah. Well, and I love the fact that mom said, unless the JSA calls because they need you for some ultra, really big, like whatchamacallit, you'll get a pass. Yeah. Otherwise, you're grounded. I love the fact that mom does recognize, okay, maybe if there's some big event going on, I've got to let her go. So it's a mom grounded in realism. And even the fact that she sits there and tells her, hey, I know I really can't force you to do it, but please. And I love that moment when she's sitting there saying, you know, the mom realizes with the power levels that Stargirl has, the staff and all that stuff, she could sneak out anytime she wants to. But she's asking her daughter to do the right thing here. And I think that for me was a great moment, a non-costume moment, you know, between mother and daughter that I absolutely loved. And the other thing I also loved about this sequencing was one of the reasons she does hang out with Red Arrow is, you know, that's, you know, partner in crime kind of, but also, you know, Emiko really doesn't have anybody she can be, you know, herself with, that she can open up with and she can be real with. You know, she needs, you know, Stargirl for that. And going back to the very first story arc that we were talking about with Dynamite, where he didn't have anybody that he could turn to, that he could deal with. So we're seeing the present-day heroes, the present-day young heroes, they have this structure. They have this support system that the previous generation didn't have. And I love the fact that you get that moment in there, and everybody can understand why she does it, why she's being there for Emiko, but they're like, hey, you got to think about yourself as well throughout this. So for me, this was a really cool balance of, yeah, I understand why you're helping her, but you can't put yourself at risk, you know, helping out, you know, this lost, you know, I'm doing air quotes around lost case when you know, because that's kind of how they're starting to see Emiko, you know, that she's more of a lost case than whereas, you know, Stargirl's not that. She's still a good kid. She still has a lot more she could do with herself.
I do like the relationship between her and Red Arrow, where you get why they're friends and you get what they bring to the table for each other. And I think that's always good when you have comics like this where there's something there that is you got to understand like why they're friends. What is that situation? What is the draw? And you see how she brings an understanding of being a superhero, an understanding of being a superhero at that age, but she also has this like free adventure spirit that Stargirl has certain limitations that she doesn't. You can see how that friendship brings something to her that nobody else can, right? And I loved that aspect of this. I thought that was something that was really fun where you get the friendship because that's important. And it's a character who I grew to really like in the Green Arrow series.
Yeah.
And I was glad to see her here. It just makes a ton of sense.
Kind of like how when we think about with Damian and John, how the connection between the two of them. Courtney and Emiko have that same kind of similar vibe where you're like, it's like, should they be friends? Should they be together? But they make sense when you see them interacting with you. She is that wild, adventurous friend, but it's not just about the adventure. They really do believe Wing is alive. They're like, hey, if this person's alive, this is true hero stuff. We're going and saving somebody. So yeah, you got to step up. Yeah, there's she's doing this for the element of adventure, but there is also an underlining of doing the right thing.
Yeah, yeah, and there's that. There's nothing wrong with having that balance. I actually like the heroes. It's one of the things I've always enjoyed about the JSA is that history of their adventure being an aspect of it. But you're right, there's a responsibility too. It's not as simple as that. It's not just blind adventure with no consequence. And actually the TNT and Dynamite story kind of leads to that. Like, that was a simpler time. But now, how do those characters and how do those concepts fit in? And I think Stargirl's a great example of that, right? She's still got that sense of adventure, but she's also got the deep responsibility where she's like, there's a legacy here in this. I'm trying to find Wing. I was just through this event where basically on what I've seen, I can't ignore the fact that there's not just one, but there's multiple lost children out there. And I need to find out who they are. I love it. She's like, do I know who TNT and Dynamite are? Who do you think you're talking to?
Well, and then I love how she didn't know everybody. I love how those that, we started, even, the person who knows the most about the Golden Age still didn't know about everybody. And again, it further adds to that mystery of how are these people getting removed? What's going on here? There is a bigger conspiracy than we know of right now.
Well, and I like that Emiko addresses this. She's like, to be fair, there's hardly anything written about any of them anywhere. John Henry Jr., Cherry Mom, these are all kids who nobody's heard of before because it's like they were erased. That's something where there is a bigger mystery that's unfolding here. Crimson Avenger, Lee Travers is dead. I mean, there's a whole story. This wall of weird that is here is super cool because there's names that you recognize that are there. And there's other names that are like, well, who is that and why? And she addresses that. I love that story. Now, it flashes to them further investigating Wing and what happened. So our man's sidekick TikTok was investigating, who can come up with some of these names, was investigating hijacking of shipments of Miraclo, and he tracked it to some docks where both he and the shipment disappeared. So there's multiple stories of these kids disappearing and it not being followed after that. How did that get hidden? Because that means that all of these heroes, none of them got together, sought them out. Why? Why did that happen? Why did that completely get erased from being a need? When you think about how heroes interact, why would these sidekicks have not been hunted down? That's the mystery. Like, how did that happen? I love that aspect of it because it's super cool.
And I love how the mystery keeps growing on this. We've got this great intro and this great beginning of all these kids are disappearing and what happened to them, where they go. And then you get a little bit of supernatural kind of element when the radio starts, basically throwing out a mayday call. She's coming. Who's coming? And I love when a book will do that with you, where it gives you enough of a tease. You know where it's coming from. You know who's, tracking it. But, these heroes, are being pulled into this. Nothing gets a hero going more than a giant mystery like this. I thought that for me was just a great usage of just some weird, creepy, supernatural kind of radio zapping and we need to, and again, Courtney was a little bit hesitant on joining because she needed to get back, but now she's all in on this mystery. We've got missing kids, we've got missing heroes. This is hero time. I loved how they pulled them in.
It's interesting with Dan Dynamite where Dan is, basically saying, we've all been forgotten. And today's heroes have got these, because we talk about that, right? The Justice League are involved in these bigger events and things like that, that these smaller scale things sometimes fall under their radar, right? So he's referencing that piece. But I didn't forget any of them. And you see him have this sequence where he's finally found the island. He's found where they're at, but you can see how treacherous that is and why perhaps people haven't come across it by accident or anything. I love the ending of this where he gets the ring and he shows up on this island, and it's almost like he's trapped in this bubble of time, right? Where now he's been de-aged. So I'm wondering if all the sidekicks that are on this island are also in this bubble. Like, there's still that age. It's an interesting sort of, ending to this whole thing.
Again, great ending with a mystery where he's like, I'm young again. I'm cursed. You shouldn't have come here, Mr. Dunbar. Who is that telling him? And then, ends with the big scream. I'm like, yes, I'm 100% all in on this. And I love the fact that we see him grab both rings. So he's got both rings with him. I wonder what happens if he hits both rings together, if he can power up.
I don't know. And is he going to be the one that powers up, or does he... I don't know. It's an interesting sort of piece, or is he going to give it to one of the other sidekicks there or something like that? I don't know. It's going to be. I'm going to be curious to see what ends up happening with this character. It's a story that immediately captivated me.
You won't get away from me this time, Buster.
Our last discussion this episode is going to be a Punchline the Gotham Game issue number 2. Teenie Howard and Blake Howard are the writers. Gleb Melnikoff and Will Robinson on art. Luis Guerrero on colors. AW's Justin Birch, on letters. Gleb Melkinoff on cover. Derek Chu, Dan Hipp, Sozo Maika, David Nakayama on the variant covers. Dave Wheelgo's editors. Ben Abernathy, group editor. And apologies for any name butchery there. This has been an interesting story. Punchline's been one of those characters that have been intriguing to follow because I really like Alexis and how they've kind of gone out of their way to not make her into Harley 2.0 or another version of Harley. She's got her whole unique way of operating. She is not like just some crazy Joker devotee. She's a different sort of Storm. I love the character. The more that they delve into who she is and flesh her out more, the more I'm finding myself fascinated by following her 2 issues in. Did you like this?
Oh, God, yeah. And I'll tell you, it's funny. The one line from the book really, I think, sums up Punchline wonderfully. It's when Bruce and Dick are talking in not the cave, well, the cave, brownstone, whatever you want to call it.
The garage,
but he says how both he and Joker are similar in that they train their prodigies, to be a refinement, not an imitation or a copycat. Punchline isn't just a copy of the Joker. She is the next level. She's the punchline to his joke. And I thought that, I'm like, oh, that is absolutely brilliant analogy of who she is. Because she's one of those characters that I've read all the stuff. I've enjoyed all the stuff. I love the statement on society, how she gets off murder. 100%. They have her locked dead to rights that she killed these people. And she not only she gets an acquittal, meaning they can never go after her for those crimes again. She's 100% free and clear of them. It's not just a drop case or drop charges. No, she went to trial, and the jury said not guilty. Absolutely love that about the character. And then we get, this kind of like just this analysis of her. I'm like, that's brilliant. I love that, man.
Yeah, and that's something I think that was something I found really, really interesting about this book was the fact that we get like this real definition of her, which at this point she's been kind of like this enigma. And I like when Batman compares what he does to what the Joker does.
Yeah.
And Dick Grayson's response to that too is, "Aw, that's nice of you. Wait, we're moving against her now?" And I like when Batman goes and takes the bike, and Dick's like, "A garage full of vehicles," and he takes my bike. Because that bike is super cool. I get, yeah, of course he's Batman. He's going to take that bike because that bike is pretty bad. It's very cool. I really liked how this story played out. And I'm glad we're seeing more Batman and Nightwing team-ups because there's something about that relationship, especially with how it's evolved, that it feels classic, but yet Dick Grayson has advanced, evolved. He's kind of come full circle where he understands and respects Bruce in a way that I think only happens over time. You know, where you get to know like what your father was trying to do for you. You can see his strengths and weaknesses and respect both. And I thought that was something that really was brought to light in this series, where it's a Punchline focused story, but we're not ignoring the rest of the cast in that this is a Bat book in this story, which I thought was cool.
Oh, big time. And like you think back to the first issue, there was some really cool Bruce and Oracle moments. You know, so they've tied in. They're tying the full Bat family in, and that's a tradition kind of going on with all the Bat books now. Bruce is really opened up to the team dynamic, and I love seeing that about him. And even the mentioning how Dick Grayson says, hey, what about Bluebird? She's tangled with her before, so that's somebody who's got a history with Punchline. So we may see a Bluebird interaction with her. So I like how they're not forgetting all the different people who've dealt with Punchline, people who will have a vested interest in Punchline. And especially the way this issue ends, we're probably going to see a cat involvement as well. So I'm like, yes, I 100% am loving how this Punchline series, I didn't know where it was going to go, whether it would be a continuation of kind of like the play on the system, gaming the system, kind of like talking about. It did the first story really did a great job of just kind of showing some of the weaknesses in the system and how present day society. This is not just, it's not a continuation of that. This is a continuation of the character. Punchline now, she's not just there to kind of say to mess with people. She's now there making her play on Gotham. She's now doing the Gotham game where she's going to try to make herself the kingpin of Gotham.
I like that they also didn't drop the Harper and her brother storyline, which is a part of it. I think there's a lot to be said about. I always liked Harper as a character. Like Bluebird was a character who I just wanted to see more of. I'm glad that we are going to see more of these characters in this, that we're not ignoring them. And I like the use of the Royal Flush Gang.
Yeah.
And they further expand this idea that the Royal Flush Gang is like huge. I mean, they're all over the place. There's multiple cells of it, and some are more effective than others. And there's an opportunity for her to take that concept and refine it and make it her own. I like that she recognizes that having a gang like that with a hierarchy of organization benefits her. It's a ready-made gang. Yeah. That she's like, well, I can insert myself in and be your leader here, and we can just kind of go off and do business because of that. And we've got Harper's brother's partner is like one of the Royal Flush Gang, and he recognizes, I can't tell him what's going on here. I'm going to tell him only enough. I'm not going to reveal that I know anything about these exo pens or anything. It was a really cool part of this, the fact that there's some secrets going on here, which shows how far Harper's brother has evolved. That he's no longer a trusted member of this group.
Yeah, and he's no longer a trusted member. Two, he wouldn't blindly look the other way.
Right.
He's seeing stuff for what it was. That first series, he wasn't really seeing the forest for the trees. He was kind of buying into the story that was being laid out to him. His eyes are open. So I like to see that growth of that character. And again, like you said, I love the fact that we have these multiple divisions. You think about a playing card, there's 4 suits. So why not have 4 separate groups? It's something I never even remotely entered my brain about the Royal Flush Gang. I'm like, they should have these divisions. They should have these variations on it because there are 4 different suits that you can have a Royal Flush, so why not? So for me, this was a really neat usage of the Royal Flush Gang, who for the longest time was the joke of the villain group. If you needed somebody to beat up on, you go get the Royal Flush Gang. They're your jobbers. They're the guys you throw in the ring just to beef up your hero. Now there's actually a legitimacy to them, and you need to have that, because good heroes really need a good villain. Well, the Royal Flush Gang isn't a joke anymore. They're actually somebody legitimate. So I'm happy with how Punchline recognizes that. Punchline's using them for her own personal gains. In the end, Punchline is going to screw him over just because That's kind of part of her nature. But I like right now how she's using them to advance her position.
Well, they have that cult-like devotion that she looks for in a gang, right? Yeah. It matches what she's looking for. I love the whole playing card as a form of travel, but I like the idea too that we see the Queen, like sitting there going, great, we've been circling around for like 20 minutes. It's cold. Yeah. You get that idea of like, this sounds all well and fine, but we're in the middle of a city. This has some effect on it. I do think the playing card thing was way cool in how it was being utilized, though.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Big time tech. I like this. Again, one of the things I did also like about this is how the characters have their own groove to them. Yeah. I'm always used to the Royal Flush Gang looking all very similar, not having their own personal style to it. King and Queen each have their own style. Ace has their own style. It's kind of a neat little usage of the concept.
But also due to Punchline. Punchline has upped their game. Punchline has given them this new look, which I'm not contradicting you. I'm more agreeing and building off of what you're saying. I like that this is Punchline saying, I can help take you to the next level. Let's dust you off and let's see where you can really go. I liked that part of this where Punchline is kind of a catalyst of them growing in this way. Which is kind of a cool thing. Batman's involvement's neat too with the gang, where you see that they're like he's actually using some of his gadgetry to take some of them out. He's getting in the middle of a turf warfare that Punchline's trying to start with. Is it Aiko Yasigawa? I know who she is, but it's one of those names that we've never really talked about on the podcast. But she's from Catwoman's world. And this is what's going to lead ultimately to Catwoman's involvement, because this is somebody who Catwoman has a understanding with, a relationship with. And now you're messing with one of Catwoman's, agreements. And Catwoman's loyal. Sometimes that loyalty gets in the way of her relationship with Bruce, her understanding of Bruce, because some of her loyalties are ones that Bruce would not necessarily agree with. And I like that this is one of those sequences where this is a loyalty that clearly is going to bring Catwoman into this gang warfare. And I thought it was something that worked really well in all of this. Because you've got some characters that are going up against the Royal Flush Gang that are assassins or violent. I love this, the one with the serpent-like features, who is, basically reacting in that way, but she's turning into a snake, and you see that aspect. But the Royal Flush Gang, that's where you see them step up, right? The Queen has her own powers, and you get to see the fact that, or it was the Ace, I'm sorry. The Ace has her own powers. You get to, or no, it was the Queen. I was right. It was the Queen.
Well, it's a combination of the Queen and the Ace working together, because she couldn't initially use her electrical power, her gauntlets, because that would zap herself. Well, right. Ace is providing an installation for her so she can.
Yeah.
I think that for me was, again, a really neat step up of the Royal Flush Gang. And again, part of that is coming from Punchline. Part of that is also coming from the gang themselves. They're doing, again, this is a really neat evolution and growth of these villains. And 100% Punchline is doing a lot of this, because, you think back to in the beginning when Cullen and the other guy, they're two different versions of the Royal Flush Gang. The one guy, Auntie, is with the clubs. Cullen's part of the Diamond group. Normally the different groups didn't work together. Well, now they are. So it's kind of a neat just usage of this concept of this gang working together, taking over, this one whole family. Their plans on, Punchline's plan on becoming, the Kingpin, Queenpin, whatever you want to call her, of Gotham, is hostile takeovers. So she's using the gang as her muscle, and she's stepping up.
And that's what I really love about this. It's something that's unique. It's a little bit different. It's her recognizing talent that the other villains aren't looking for, right? So these are people that are, to your point, they can use a refresh and become really effective, But you get why, like, Two-Face isn't going after them. The Joker's not going after them. Penguin's not going after them because they've been kind of viewed as a joke. So why go after that talent when they already have access to top-tier established talent? She's building this talent and building loyalty from this talent, which is an interesting sort of piece because she's like almost the glue that they needed in order to become more effective, at least from everything that we're seeing here. Just a really great opening sequence, opening issue. We're 2 chapters into this storyline, and I feel like you were asking before if this was going to be a continuation of what was coming before. It is. It's like a continuation and evolution, which is hard to do when you're taking over from another writer, right?
Yeah.
Because this is a concept that was put on the table from another writer, and you hope you get this. It doesn't always go well like this.
Right.
Because we've had other characters that have like vanished, and had to be on the shelf for a bit because they lost their way. I feel like this is the opposite of that. I feel like we're seeing a growth in Punchline here that shows an honoring of the original concept, but where can we take her now is more at the forefront of this. And I think that's harder to do, and I more respect it with this because I'm really enjoying this ride.
Something you said I absolutely 100% love and agree with. You said this is an evolution of the character. Agree completely. I was wondering if we were just going to, when I say continuation, I meant continuation on the same themes and threads that were done before.
Yeah.
We're going beyond that. There's still a lot that playing in here because that's very much part of Punchline's core. But again, they're taking Punchline to the next level. They're evolving her as a Gotham villain. And I absolutely love seeing that. And again, just the viciousness and the intelligence of Punchline, again, completely played out this. Not only did she really play the gang, the gang, she played everybody off each other. She really one-upped on Batman here. I love the fact that she knows Batman's biggest weakness is injured people. He's got to, granted, we've got a crime boss, but stabs her, throws her over the building, knowing Batman will go after the girl, not her, and she'll get away. I always love when villains do that kind of stuff because you can kill somebody or you can wound them and make them, making them a distraction to the hero. She wounded her, potentially killed her, made her a distraction so she can get her escape. But again, great ending of this. I love how Bruce is telling her, hey, if you're not afraid of what I'll do, you should be afraid of Catwoman. Because right now, the cat's involved. You just hurt the cat's friend. You just hurt someone that Catwoman cares about. Guess what, Punchline? You're now dealing with the cat as well as the bat. So excited for next issue.
Yeah, I actually like what they did with Mr. Knave, too, from the last issue. How there'd been like some work done on him. I was like, what the heck are they doing with this guy's eye? What are they doing? So he's being booted up during that fight where, there's a recognition that, like, this is Batman. This isn't going to go well. I love that his I-beam comes out, and that's what knocked out Batman. I like that they're joking around. Is that the new kid? Well, he better not look like that forever, because he's in beta. And I love when he's like, you see him, he just looks like this grotesque kind of creature, but wow. He's already recharging up to 25% from the initial blast, which just shows that this is going to be a very effective sort of weapon of sorts. In this process. I thought it was just really, really well done. The fact that it added a creep factor. And Punchline would do that because she looks at characters like that as expendable, but yet it has this...
cannon fodder.
Yeah.
100% cannon fodder.
Yeah.
She's had, again, he's in beta. He's the beta test. It's not the final version. So we're looking for the next version 2, version 3. Those will be more of, keep these around. Use him, figure out how we can improve it, and get rid of them.
And I loved that aspect of this. I just thought it was just a great series. I didn't know what to, like you, I did not know what to expect from this. And I've always loved, I wanted to read more Punchline. So you could have given me something that was just more of the same, and I would have been satisfied with that. When you give me something like this where we're taking it to we're kicking it up a notch and really showing some forethought at how do we advance this character, now you're hooking me in. I'm very content. It's funny, I usually scream for series. I like what DC's doing now, and I actually have done this multiple times. I like what DC's doing now with these miniseries where you can count on the fact that you're going to get more of them, right? Along the way. And I'm really impressed that they're letting them be story-driven like this, where there's a reason for these miniseries. This is what DC's doing right now, direction-wise. You're hooking me. It's not everything needs to be an ongoing monthly. This one works. This one really, really worked for me. A nice surprise. Nice surprise.
Like a human helicopter, the Flash rotates his body, rising faster, faster.
I'd like to remind everyone about our show voicemail line. It's 1-440-388-4434 or Dr. Norge on Skype. RagingBullets@gmail.com is our email address. If you prefer to contact us that way. We love having you part of our show. Feel free to call in at any point in time. RagingBullets.com is our show website. That's where you'll find news on the latest releases of our episodes. We send that right out to Twitter. We send it out to our Facebook fan page. We are proud to be part of an amazing Facebook group community. And we recorded 2 episodes back-to-back. That's why there's no speeding bullets on this next episode. There will be speeding bullets on the next one. Easy for me to say. But thank you for everyone who puts that together. The About Us section of our show website is where you can find out how to connect with us on gaming platforms and social media. We love to connect with you, and we update that regularly. So feel free to jump on and connect with us in any platform that you'd like to. We are sponsored, as always, by DCB Service and InStockTrades.com. Jim, what's going on over at DCBService.com?
We have Wonder Woman. Who is Wonder Woman? The deluxe hardcover edition, 50% off, only $14.99. And we have also the absolute Dark Knights Death Metal, 50% off, only $50. Thank you, DCBS.
Over at InStockTrades.com, they have this great coming soon section. It's a great way to take a look at what's coming out across all companies, so that way you can kind of plan out and map out your purchases. They have the Aquaman trade paperback, Rogues hardcover, Shazam Thundercrack trade paperback, Superman Son of Kal-El hardcover volume 2. They have the World of Krypton trade paperback. These are all coming out right now as we're recording this. It's a great way to update yourself on these wish lists as far as books that we're all trying to map out budget, right? I like to collect a lot of trade paperbacks and hardcovers as my way to have my physical media. That's what I prefer now. So it's nice to be able to map out a roadmap of what books that I want to get. And I want to thank DCB Service and InStockTrades.com for continuing to support our show. Our next episode, Jim and I are going to be back, and we're going to talk about Justice Society of America and Blue Beetle Graduation Day. We will see you then.
Bye.
All right, you guys. Are you ready to sing your song?
I'd say we are. Yeah, let's sing it now.
Okay, this should be fun. Now get ready for your cue. Okay, Sean?
Okay.
Okay, Jim? Jim? Jim!
Okay. Raging Bullets time is here. We talk about what we hold dear. Comic books and TV shows. Superheroes and their clothes. Justice League and so much more. I just love Green Lantern Corps. We talk about the books we've read with spoilers straight ahead.
Okay, fellas, get ready. That was very good, Sean.
Naturally.
Jim, you're a little flat there, so be careful. Jim? Jim? Jim!
Okay. Justice League and so much more. I still love Green Lantern Corps. DC Comics are what we know. The Raging Bullet Show. DC Comics are what we know. The Raging Bullet Show.
Excellent job, guys.
Let's sing it again. Yeah, let's sing it again.
No, that's enough. Let's not push it.
Push it. What is that? Yeah, what are you talking about?
No, I didn't mean anything by that. Sean, Jim, how long do you want the song to go?
Look, it's our production.